All right, so get this. Today, we are doing a deep dive on a rivalry you probably didn't see coming.
Oh, yeah.
Kamala Harris and Kimberly Guilfoyle.
Mm,
Two names you definitely know from the political scene.
right.
But their story, it goes way back to San Francisco,
Really
long before Washington was even on their radar.
fascinating.
So we are going to take a look at their early careers to see how their ambitions and rivalry in San Francisco kind of foreshadowed the very different paths that their political careers ended up taking.
It's really a fascinating story about ambition and power and how those early experiences can shape someone's path.
So true.
We were talking about the early 2000s in San Francisco, and you have these two women, both lawyers,
Okay.
both on the rise and already making waves.
Yeah, from what I'm seeing in these sources, it was like the legal world's version of just like a high-stakes poker game.
Yeah.
And these two were holding all the cards.
They were movers and shakers for sure.
But what I find really interesting is how their San Francisco days might have influenced the very different paths their political careers took.
Absolutely. And to understand that we need to understand the lay of the land.
Okay.
San Francisco politics back then, it was a different breed.
Really?
Look at fist fights, backroom deals,
Oh, wow.
and this one power broker that everyone called Cayo.
Cayo, what is that short for?
Short for knockout. He had a reputation for knocking people out, politically speaking, of course.
Yikes. So this guy wielded a lot of power.
He was a force to be reckoned with, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got this intense political scene, and then enter Kamala Harris and Kimberly Guilfoyle.
Right.
Can you paint a picture of who they were back then?
They were a study in contrasts, operating in the same circles, yet going about it in totally different ways.
Okay.
Kamala, even back then, was incredibly strategic, reserved, kind of an outsider, working her way into San Francisco's legal elite.
And Kimberly.
Kimberly was practically San Francisco royalty.
Mm-hmm.
Her father was a powerful political advisor,
Wow.
known as the Godfather, so she already had a lot of influence and connections.
So she had the inside track.
You could say that, and she had this confidence, knew how to work a room, definitely comfortable in the spotlight.
Okay, so you've got these two ambitious women,
Yes.
different backgrounds, different styles. Sounds like a recipe for some rivalry.
It certainly was.
Okay, so tell me about that. What went down between them?
Well, at the center of it all is this incident where Kimberly alleges Kamala tried to block her from getting a job.
Hold on, really. Tell me more about that.
So the story goes, Kimberly applied for a position in the district attorney's office.
Okay, and for those of us who aren't lawyers, remind me what that position does exactly.
Right, so the district attorney is basically the top prosecutor for a city or county.
Okay.
It's a pretty big deal, especially in a city like San Francisco.
Got it. So a coveted position.
Exactly.
What happened next?
Well, Kimberly claims Kamala called her pretending to be on the hiring committee and basically said there wasn't a spot for her.
Wow. Did Kamala admit to doing that?
She denied it, of course.
Okay.
But what's interesting is that one of their former bosses actually backs up Kimberly's story, saying that Kamala later admitted to making the call.
Wow, that adds a whole other layer of intrigue.
Right.
So we've got this central mystery. Did Kamala actually try to sabotage Kimberly's career?
Right.
And if so, why?
Yeah.
Was it professional jealousy, a personality clash, something else entirely?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the sources we have don't give a clear answer.
Mm.
Neither woman has ever fully explained what sparked this initial conflict.
Okay, so we've got some serious tension brewing between these two.
Oh, yeah.
But here's where it gets even more interesting. So we've got this alleged incident, this tension just simmering beneath the surface, and then this already dramatic story takes another turn.
Yeah, you might remember this one. It was huge.
Oh, yeah.
The dog mauling case of 2001.
Right.
That was a turning point for sure.
For both women, actually, but in very different ways.
Right.
For Kimberly, this case throws her into the national spotlight.
Absolutely. It had all the elements of a true crime thriller, like a wealthy San Francisco neighborhood.
Okay.
Gruesome death. And Kimberly, with her charisma and legal acumen, she became the face of the prosecution.
Wow, so she was thrust into the spotlight.
Oh, she was everywhere. Court TV, newspapers. She even received death threats.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, there were rumors of a murder contract out on her.
That's intense.
It was high stakes for sure.
So while Kimberly's dealing with this high-profile, high-pressure case, what's Kamala up to?
Kamala's career at this point is a study in contrasts.
Okay, how so?
She's operating much more behind the scenes, as usual. Remember, she's got her eye on becoming district attorney.
Right, that's a powerful elected position.
Exactly. And she knows that to get there, building a strong network in San Francisco is essential.
And she was good at it. I mean, I'm struck by how many of the sources describe her ability to connect with people, build relationships, and always think several steps ahead.
Exactly. She understood the game, and she played it masterfully.
Wow.
And at the same time, Kimberly's star is rising in this very public way. She's making a different kind of power move. She marries the mayor of San Francisco,
Gavin Newsom.
the one and only.
Talk about a power couple.
Right.
This was San Francisco's Camelot moment, wasn't it?
It really was. Their wedding was this lavish affair covered by all the society pages.
Wow.
It solidified Kimberly's status in the city's elite circles.
Okay, so we've got Kimberly in this very public role, married to the mayor, and Kamala working her way up more strategically. It seems like they're on very different paths, but still circling each other in a way.
And that brings us to 2003, the year Kamala decides to run for district attorney.
Oh, here we go.
Remember that simmering tension we talked about earlier?
Oh, it's about to boil over, isn't it?
Big time. Just weeks before the election, Kimberly goes public with her criticisms of Kamala.
Wow, really?
She accuses her of being unsupportive, even going so far as to dredge up that job application incident we discussed earlier.
Wow, she's really going there. What was the strategy there, do you think? Was it about trying to hurt Kamala's chances of winning?
That's what a lot of people assumed at the time.
Right.
But when you look at it closely, it's not so clear-cut. Some argue that it was less about derailing Kamala's campaign and more about Kimberly finally airing her grievances publicly.
So you think maybe it was more personal than political?
Perhaps. Or maybe it was a bit of both, but what's interesting is how Kamala handled it.
What did she do?
She didn't take the bait, at least not publicly.
Wow.
In fact, she was even quoted saying that she looked forward to working with Kimberly if elected.
Talk about taking the high road.
Right.
Although I imagine that must have taken some serious restraint on her part.
I would imagine so, especially with the stakes so high. But again, it speaks to her strategic mind. She knew that engaging in a public spat wouldn't help her win the election.
And when she did.
She did indeed.
So Kamala becomes San Francisco's district attorney and uses that as a launch pad for an incredible political career. Attorney General of California, U.S. Senator, and now Vice President.
It's a pretty remarkable trajectory.
It really is. And while this is happening, Kimberly makes some big moves of her own. Remember how we talked about her being drawn to the spotlight?
I do. And something tells me she found an even bigger stage.
She certainly did. She certainly did. Kimberly ends up pivoting away from law altogether and dives headfirst into the world of media.
Yeah, she becomes a legal analyst on television
Okay.
and eventually lands at Fox News.
And this is where things get really interesting, I think, when we consider their diverging paths.
Right.
Kimberly, with her charisma and her sharp wit,
Right.
she thrives in that environment.
Oh, yeah. She's in her element.
She's not afraid to be provocative
Well.
or to take a strong stance.
Right.
And you can see how those instincts, those same qualities we saw in her early days in San Francisco, how they play out on a much larger scale.
Totally. It's like those instincts that served her so well in the San Francisco political scene. The confidence, the sharp elbows, they found a whole new playing field in cable news.
Exactly. And it's a stark contrast, I think, to Kamala's approach, which remained very much rooted in strategy.
Yeah.
Building consensus.
Right.
Working within the system.
Totally.
So we have Kimberly, who embraces the world of right-wing media and becomes a vocal supporter of Donald Trump.
Right.
And then we have Kamala rising through the ranks of the Democratic Party. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it, how their paths, which started in the same world, diverge so dramatically.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If you went back to those early days in San Francisco and told people these two women who were once rivals for positions in local government would end up on opposite sides of this massive political divide, would they believe you?
Probably not. It's almost hard to reconcile those two realities.
Yeah.
But it speaks to something I think we've been circling this whole time.
What's that?
How much of our trajectory is shaped by those early choices, those early experiences.
Right, and how those choices made in one context can lead to these wildly different outcomes.
Totally.
It makes you think about the forces that shape a political identity. How much of it is personality, how much is circumstance, how much is just being in the right place at the right time.
It's fascinating, and it makes you wonder, do you think their paths were inevitable given their personalities and those early choices, or was it all just a matter of circumstance? Could things have gone differently?
It's a question I'm still grappling with.
Me too. It's one of those things we may never know for sure, but it certainly makes for a compelling story, and I think it highlights something kind of important about leadership and ambition.
What's that?
There's no one right way to do it.
That's true.
Kamala's strategic, measured approach led her to the White House.
Right.
Kimberly's embrace of the spotlight made her a powerful voice in conservative media.
Totally.
Two very different paths, both impactful in their own way.
Absolutely. It reminds me that success can look very different depending on how you define it and what you ultimately want to achieve.
Well, this has been quite the deep dive, full of ambition.
And rivalry.
And maybe even a little bit of Shakespearean drama.
Indeed, who knew San Francisco politics could be so captivating?
Right. It just goes to show that sometimes the most fascinating stories are hiding in plain sight. So the next time you find yourself thinking about politics or ambition or just the surprising ways life can unfold, remember the story of Kamala and Kimberly.
Yeah.
It might just change the way you view your own path, your own choices, and the possibilities that lie ahead. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us, and we will see you on the next one.